and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 585, and today's date is February 6, 2015, and the title of this episode is The Economy is Collapsing, and the U.S. government's manipulated numbers will not stop it at all. Let's get into the economic collapse news. Now, Greece and the ECB, they are still battling. The people in Greece decided to take to the streets to support their government, and they're rallying for anti-austerity. But this protest was very different from all the other protests in Greece. The barriers were taken down in front of the Parliament building. There were no police around to push them back. And there were 5,000 people out there protesting against the ECB, saying, we do not want austerity. We want a debt write-off. And you can see, without the police there, without the barriers and allowing the people to speak freely, nothing happens in the way of violence. When you introduce the police and they continually push you back, and you erect barriers in front of the government buildings, it's a signal to the people that the government is ready to use force against them. And we can see from everything that's going on, this is what's happening in many, many countries. They are erecting barriers. Here in the United States, they're doing it in front of the White House and in front of many government buildings. They're creating buffer zones. In other countries, in Italy, Spain, France, Belgium, UK, they are bringing more and more police to the streets to control the people because the government is afraid. The new government in Greece is not afraid, and they're showing it. We see that the S&P has downgraded Greece now. What's very interesting is that the downgrade comes after 5 months after upgrading Greece. So when they were paying back this huge amount of debt, and they weren't talking about a debt write-off, they said their economy is doing well. Now that they don't want to pay the debt, the economy is doing poorly. Well, if we look at Iceland, they decided to write off a lot of their debt, and they're doing quite well. Of course, the corporate media is not telling you about this. Greece rating is going to be cut to B- from a B, and may be cut further depending on how Greece reacts to the situation. So it's very interesting how this is all starting to come together. Now, Greece is standing firm. They're not giving in, and we can see the central bankers are getting angry with this situation. I wouldn't be surprised if something might happen to the government. Maybe there's an assassination attempt. Maybe there's a terrorist attempt inside of Greece, etc., to push the central banking agenda, to say this is why you need us. I wouldn't be surprised. But we can see that Alex Tsipras, or the Prime Minister, is working with Putin. And they agreed to boost bilateral ties in a telephone conversation during which the latter invited the new Greek premier to an event in Moscow in May to mark the victory over Nazism. The two men agreed to boost cooperation in the economy and energy, tourism, culture, and transport sectors. They also agreed on the need to secure peace and stability in Ukraine. So we can see right now, as the ECB, the central bankers, continually put pressure on Greece, they might be turning towards Russia. They might be turning towards the BRIC system. They're turning away. They're making sure they have other alternatives to fund their system, to spur economic growth. Now it looks like the Eurogroup is going to give Greece a 10-day ultimatum. Either apply for a bailout or exit. You decide. So, by February, 16th? They need to have an answer. And we're going to have to watch this very, very carefully to see how this all turns out. Now, here in the United States, we see the unemployment numbers are out and the corporate media is out there, and they're trying to convince us, since the unemployment number, ticked up by 0.1%. And what's funny about all of this, when the unemployment number goes down, everything is good. If the unemployment goes up, everything is good. And we know these numbers are completely manipulated, so they're actually meaningless because they manipulate everything. And when the numbers completely separate themselves from what's really going on in the economy, they have no alternative but to continually manipulate, and they can only do it so far because if they keep pushing it, the numbers really look out of whack. So they had to make it go up by 0.1%. But the corporate media is out there, and they're saying, this is coming from Business Insider, we should be thrilled the unemployment rate is rising. What? They put a spin on everything, but they don't give you the real facts. They tell you that people are dropping out of the workforce because they looked at their family, their children, their wife, and said, listen, I don't want to work anymore. I had it. I'm tired of bringing in income, paying my bills. I'm exhausted. We don't want to go on trips anymore. Forget about it. Forget food for the family. Forget about clothing. Forget about the electric staying on. Forget about the water staying on. I really don't feel like looking for work anymore. I'm just going to give up. Is that okay with all of you? And we're not going to save anymore. We're done with that. We're not going to buy anything anymore. We're just completely done. This is what they're trying to convince us of. Does that make sense to anyone? It doesn't make sense to me. I've been unemployed before. I was laid off back in 2008. I had no job whatsoever. And guess what? I never gave up. I continued. Actually, I started a business of my own. It failed. It didn't go anywhere. I couldn't get it started back in 2008, going into 2009, as things were getting worse. But I continued. I had to find something. I didn't say, hey, to my family, guess what? We're running out of savings. We have no money. That's it. We're just done. I'm not going to look. I even applied to all the different retailers out there to try to find a job. No one would accept me. And I continually send out my resume with absolutely no response. So I know what it feels like not to have work and to actually fail at things. And I can see by what has been going on here, they're trying to convince us that everything is fine. I mean, the BLS just reported that in January, a whopping 257,000 jobs were added, far above the 228,000 expected, but the unemployment rate went down. The unemployment rate rose from 5.6% to 5.7%. They were expecting it to be around 5%. I thought they were going to leave it alone and leave it there, but I guess everything was so out of whack they had to tick it up 1, which is meaningless anyhow. But most notable, the average hourly earnings surged from last month's negative 0.2% by a whopping 0.5%, the highest monthly jump in average hourly earnings since November of 2008. It remains to be seen just how this happened with all of these mass layoffs, especially in the oil sector. Something doesn't make sense. So we look at the numbers. We try to understand them. We try to understand what they did to them. Back in January of 2014, the jobs were at 144,000, which was absolutely horrible. And it was blamed on the winter and the snow, and people just couldn't find jobs. And we can see that what they did, they started to revise all the numbers. And they went all the way back to the beginning of the year of 2014. They actually decided to take that number of 144,000 and bring it all the way up to 247,000 jobs. So they boosted the numbers in January. Almost, actually more than 100,000. And if we look from that point on, they revised all the numbers all the way throughout the year. Some months were very, very high that they increased the numbers. And when we look at the numbers, we see that the job numbers in 2014 went from 2.9 million to 3.1 million. So basically, they're manipulating everything that we see here. But we know thousands of people were laid off in the energy space and from major corporations. Are they just not counting them? So we look closer at that. And what do we see? We see that coming from Challenger Gray and Christmas, about 21,322 jobs were cut in the energy space in January. What did the BLS report? Well, they didn't report that. They did not report 21,322 jobs. They reported 1,900. Does that make sense to anybody? It makes no sense whatsoever. They decided, we just won't count these people. Actually, all those people in retail who are not working a certain number of hours, getting paid a certain number of dollars, those people are not counted either. Those people who have not been on an interview in 4 weeks are no longer counted. They manipulated all these numbers to make it seem like everything is right on track, even though the unemployment rate ticked up by 0.1%, which is absolutely meaningless. It's keeping steady in what they're doing. And we can see that there are 92.9 million Americans that are considered to be not in the labor force. Millions upon millions of those Americans would work if they could. Overall, there are 101 million U.S. adults that do not have a job right now. So the truth is that the percentage of U.S. adults that do not have good jobs is actually far lower than 44%. 44% of the U.S. adults are employed for 30 or more hours per week. But that number's a little bit lower if you really look at the situation and you look at these numbers. So what is going on here? They need to keep this illusion alive that we're in a recovery. And when you look at the corporate media, they are pushing this as hard as they possibly can. If the unemployment rate goes down, it's fantastic. If it goes up, it's fantastic. And they continually tell you that everything is the way it's supposed to be, and this is how a recovery is. And then we look at the real economic indicators of what's really going on. Let's go back a little bit. So we understand in the energy space there's about 23,000 jobs that are lost. And here's more from the beginning of this year. And we're only in February. Sony, 2,100 jobs. Weatherford International, 8,000. Ericsson, 150. We see Walt Disney, 500. Tim Horton, 350. CIBC, 500. Sega, 300. Lariat Services, 265. JP Morgan, 350. AOL, 150. Helmerich & Payne, 2,000. Air Products, about 450. Citrix, 900. Sony, 1,000. And there's more. I can go on and on and on. All these people, where are they going to get jobs? Now think about it. Think about all those people that were laid off last year. Think about all the retail stores that have been going out of business. Where are they going to get jobs? A lot of stores, a lot of companies are going bankrupt. Radio Shack. Staples is going to buy Office Depot. Most likely they're going to be closing thousands of stores. Thousands upon thousands of people will be out of work. Why is Staples doing this? They're getting rid of the competition. There's not enough out there, and they need to acquire. This is why they do this. And we can see they are pushing this agenda. They're pushing the recovery propaganda as hard as they possibly can because they are getting ready to push an event to bring us to war. Now, the Canadian finance minister is out there, and he just kind of blew the entire narrative of what is going on in the economy and around the world. The Canadian finance minister, Joe Oliver, said on Friday, although the United States is carrying the world economy at the moment, that is simply not sustainable. And we know this. This entire system is not sustainable. The Chinese rating agency has come out with a warning. This is Dagong Rating Agency. You know, the same rating agency that gave Gazprom a AAA rating while S&P Moody's downgraded Gazprom. Well, the head of China's Dagong Rating Agency said, the world economy may slip into a new global financial crisis in the next few years. That is even worse than 2008. I believe we will have to face a new world financial crisis in the next few years. It is difficult to give the exact time, but all the signs are present, such as the growing volume of debts and the unsteady development of the economies of the U.S. and the EU. Developed countries, including the U.S. and the EU, remain the main consumers. But these countries develop only if there is consumer demand, while the main potential for this consumption is based on borrowing. The U.S. and EU and Japan are increasing consumption through growth in crediting, which poses a risk. And this is what we said. Europe, United States, we are a consumption-based economy. We produce nothing. We have no manufacturing. This is why people cannot find work today. This is why they're going into the service industry. That's all that's left, to service the rest of the people. And as time goes on, an economy that is consuming cannot be sustained because people continually borrow more, use their credit cards, the government has to borrow, and the entire system falls apart. And we're seeing this right now. I mean, think about what's going on here. Are you actually out there purchasing an automobile, or are you renting it? Most of the sales today are leases. It's really a rental. You're doing it on credit. You don't own the car. You have to give it back after a certain period of time. Something is way off in the way our world is operating today. And what's the problem is the central bank. It always goes back to that. Yes, you can get your raises. They can up minimum wage. But what is going on will never, ever change. Actually, it will get worse. And if you notice, over time, it has gotten worse. Now, I'm saying, is every single person feeling this? No, but the majority is. Those who are doing well, those who are out there making the money, they're doing fine. But it can end in a split second. I know a lot of people that lived in very, very wealthy neighborhoods who had fantastic jobs. 2008 came along, and guess what? Their world came crumbling down. They moved out of the area. They had to sell their houses at a loss, and they were devastated. They lost everything. And the same thing is going to happen. Actually, this time, it's going to be much, much worse. It's going to be horrific. There's nothing that can stop it at this point. And we can see that as time goes on, the situation here is getting worse. Now, China and Russia, they've been making deals all around the world. They've been making deals now in South America. They've been making deals with Argentina. They've been making deals with Venezuela. They've been making deals with Cuba, with Nicaragua. They're making deals in every single area, helping different countries get out of the economic situation they're in. We see they're helping Argentina, even though the U.S. said they have defaulted. They are funding them, helping them spur economic growth. We see China is helping Venezuela. We see China is out there in Afghanistan helping them spur economic growth. They're in Africa doing the same thing. What is the United States doing? Setting up military assets in every single country, pushing war, pushing the propaganda that there's terrorism, putting the people into fear so they will go fight those wars, to convince them that, yes, this is what you have to do. This is what our government is doing. This is what the Canadian government is doing. This is what Australia is doing. This is what the European governments are doing at this point. We see that the government is continually spying on every single person. And we can see the NSA, they really didn't do anything to modify the way or what they're doing with spying. Actually, they increased the spying apparatus. They're spying on more people. They want more laws passed where they can get your private information. Even the journalists in the corporate media are out there saying, yes, we believe the government is spying on us, watching us, controlling the flow of information. Again, we go back to 10 ways of closing down a society. And here we see that 64% believe that the government is already collecting data from them right now. And this is coming from the journalists. This was a Pew Research poll stating that journalists are afraid. They're nervous. The government is spying on them, making sure they only tell and put out the propaganda the government wants. That's it. This is why they've been trying to control the alternative/new media. This is why they've taken down YouTube channels. This is why they're trying to pass the laws where they make the internet a public utility, where they can push the controls and have the alternative new media go for licenses. And you have to be accepted, just like the corporate media. This is what they're trying to do. Yes, Obama is out there and he's saying, yes, net neutrality. But in the background, what he's saying is, we want this as a public utility. We want them to apply for licenses so they can report the news. And we will reject almost every single one of them. And this way, they'll be doing it not in accordance with the law. And we can go after them and shut them down. This is what they're trying to do. This is exactly what they're trying to do. And many countries are doing this right now. I know we had this march in France after the Charlie Hebdo free speech, but we know, and I reported on this, that many of the leaders there were not for free speech. I mean, Erdogan was out there from Turkey, marching proudly that, yes, we want free speech. And what do we see in his country? Like many others, police are using pepper spray to stop protests. They haven't even gotten off the bus and they were arrested because they don't want people to speak out. They don't want the protesting. They don't want free speech. Yes, out to the public, this is what they're saying, but their actions are completely the opposite. And we understand this. We see it happening every single day. Now, we understand the United States government central bankers have been demonizing many different countries. Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, Syria, Venezuela, and many others. And we see North Korea especially right now, they are pushing a regime change. This is just one of the countries. They have slapped North Korea with new sanctions once again. And the bill would inevitably hit a lot of the Chinese companies also, because North Korea does a lot of business with China, and this would hurt China along with North Korea. Now, out in Ukraine, we see that the Ukraine government is trying to separate themselves from Russia, and one way of doing this is looking for gas in different areas. And we know that Yatsenyuk said that, yes, they will stop the flow of gas from Russia and turn towards Europe. At this point in time, the EU supplies Ukraine with about 67% of gas, and the other 33% is coming from Russia. So you can see they're weaning themselves off of Russia right now because they understand that they're going to push this war agenda as hard as they possibly can. Now, the president of France and Angela Merkel, they are trying to put together a peace plan. And they're using the 9-page peace plan proposed by Putin. If you notice, they're not using the peace plan by Kiev. They're not using a peace plan by the United States government central bankers. They're not using the peace plan by the EU. Why? Because there is no peace plan from them. Because they're on a war mission. Putin put together a peace plan because he's not looking to have war. If he wanted war, he could have had it a long time ago. But we can see that they're trying to diffuse the situation. The French and the German leaders are coming to Moscow to help put together peace, because they realize if this war goes forward, this war could spread into their countries, and they will be back in another world war. But again, the United States government, the central bankers, they don't care. They actually want war. And this is why the United States is really not working with them on this peace deal. Yes, they talk and they speak how they're behind it. But how could they be behind it? It makes no sense, because they're looking to bring in lethal weapons. They're looking to push the war agenda in the Middle East. They don't want peace. They want war. And every action that we see from them shows us this. Now, the ex-NATO chief has been warning that Putin could attack the Baltics. What? He's saying this because France and Germany are working with Putin to put together a peace deal, and they're saying that Putin might lash out against the Baltics. It makes no sense whatsoever. This is more propaganda once again. France and Germany are not looking to bring in lethal weapons into Ukraine, while the United States is looking to bring in lethal weapons. So we can see how they're on two separate sides right now. Where the United States central bankers, they want war. They want it really bad. They need to cover up this entire collapse. The European people are looking at the situation and saying, wait a minute, if there is war, it's going to be fought right here. And we should stop this before it happens. McCain is out there and he is threatening to arm Kiev, with or without Obama's support. He said U.S. lawmakers will write legislation requiring the United States to send arms to Ukraine if President Obama does not move to send weapons. We'll be looking at marking up legislation that calls for it, McCain said. One-track mind. And again, let's go back to the days where the king, the leaders went out and they were the ones in the front line. This is what our leaders need to do. If they want war so bad, they need to step up and they need to be on the front lines, showing us this is how bad they want war. And their families should go with them because they're supporting them. And if they do this, then the American people say, okay, our leaders are out there. They got their fatigues on, they have their weapon, and they're in front of me. I will follow. But guess what? Our leaders don't do that because they're not real leaders. They're wimps. They're fakes. They're bankers. That's all they are. They want everyone else to fight while they sit back and collect the wealth from both sides of the war. And then after the war, when they have to rebuild, they can't wait for the governments to come back and borrow the money to rebuild. This is how they make their money. Poroshenko is out there saying if the conflict escalates, I'll be ready to declare martial law throughout the country. I am not doing this now because it would lead to the restriction of democracy and freedom. Yeah, that's why he's not doing it right now. Eventually, we might see him declare martial law because things will be getting out of hand and he will not be able to control the situation. Now, John Kerry is out there and he is out there saying that, yes, the U.S. wanted a diplomatic, peaceful solution, but Russians were blocking every peaceful solution because they're sending tanks, they're sending troops, they're sending everything into Ukraine. Let me just tell you this. If Russia was actually sending tanks and troops, first of all, the government, the United States government, the Ukraine government, NATO, would have satellite images. Secondly, the Kiev government would have been overthrown already a long time ago. And first of all, they would come in with air power first. And believe me, when Russia is attacking, you would know. You would know exactly what is going on. Because the U.S., NATO, Ukraine, There'd be pictures, photographs, satellite imagery, and I'm talking about that clear 3D color imagery of what was going on. Russia would come in with air power, then follow up with tanks and soldiers, and I'd say it'd take about 3 days before they're completely demolished in Ukraine. And we can see right now they are pushing the propaganda as hard as they possibly can to convince everyone that this is really happening. And we know from Amendment 114, the Smith-Mundt Act of 2012, which was a rider on the NDAA, Section 501, the United States government is allowed to use propaganda on the American people. Everything that they report is propaganda. It's a lie to convince you that we need to go to war. I mean, they're going as far as saying that the Pentagon study was recently unearthed from a dumpster behind the U.S. Naval War College that Putin has Asperger's syndrome. Now, of course, that part was made up, but they're saying that he has Asperger's. So basically, the Pentagon's long-term military strategy with regards to Russia is maybe Putin has a neurological disorder. Of course, researchers can't prove their theory about Putin because they didn't examine him. So this is just all propaganda out there saying, we think he has Asperger's. And also they're saying that he hasn't received all his vaccinations. I mean, they are using everything and anything they possibly can to convince that Putin is off his rocker when he's looking for peace. And when we look at our leaders here in the United States and Europe, NATO, I should say, they only have a one-track mind. They only deal in absolutes. War. War. This is why we don't see a peace plan. We don't see. Where was their peace plan? Where was their 9-step peace plan? Wait a minute. Isn't Obama a Nobel Peace Prize winner for peace? Where is his 9-step, 12-step, 5-step peace plan? Non-existent. Now, out in the Middle East, we see the Yemens have finally taken full control of Yemen. They dissolved the parliament. They're setting up a new parliament. And we can see this is another country where the United States central bankers will need to get into. And they're going to try to move into each one of these countries because the Islamic State is a proxy army. They use them because wherever the countries they need to get back into, that's where the Islamic State's going to be. We see that the U.S. officials are freaking out about the Islamic State in Libya. Several unnamed U.S. counterterrorism officials told ABC News that the Islamic State is looking to expand and assert itself in Libya. I am becoming concerned with how quickly their new affiliates are getting organized, one official told the broadcaster. The official added that the Islamic State pretty much owns Libya. Yes, the people took back Libya. And every time you hear the Islamic State, it's really the people of that country. Do you really think the United States government and the coalition forces are fighting the Islamic State? No. They are fighting the people in each one of these countries. In Iraq, in Libya, in Yemen, in Lebanon, in Syria. They're fighting President Assad's army. That's really what's going on right now. And we can see they're going to make their move into Libya. This is why the propaganda has started already. The official stated, "We have zero collection there and zero authority." He added that Libya could be used as a launching point for attacks on Europe, as Libya is only an hour away. It's all starting to come together. They're pushing their agenda. Boehner is out there, and he's saying that he expects President Obama to seek congressional authorization for using military force against the Islamic State soon. This is already a done deal. They're already doing it. And we can see that the United States is preparing for war. The United States will use military force unilaterally, if necessary, when our enduring interests demand it, when our people are threatened, when our livelihoods are at stake, and when the security of our allies is in danger. This is coming from a new document called the National Security Strategy based on selective use of force. Working with Congress, we will train and equip local partners and provide operational support to gain ground against terrorist groups. Washington would prefer to act with allies and partners, as the threshold for military action is higher when U.S. interests are not directly threatened. In such cases, we, the United States, will seek to mobilize allies and partners to share the burden and achieve lasting outcomes. The United States will reassure its allies by backing their security commitments. We are getting ready for war. Obama is out there. He wants unconstrained congressional authorization for war, where he can do whatever he wants, and wherever the Islamic State is, that's where the United States can invade. If they need to go into Ukraine, he has the authority to do it. He will be a dictator of war. This is what is planned. We can see that data hack yesterday in Anthem is being now blamed on China. They're saying that the investigators suspect, and of course it's very difficult to figure out who actually did this because they bounced their attacks off many, many servers. They covered up with IPs, and it is very, very difficult to find. But investigators suspect, they have no proof whatsoever, Chinese hackers may be responsible for the breach. So you can see what they're doing. North Korea cyber attacks, Russia cyber attacks, Syria cyber attacks, the Chinese cyber attack. All the players are always the same. Now, the U.S. Attorney General has a message for the American market. Beware of foreign spies. This message is coming from John Carlin, the Assistant U.S. Attorney General. What is he actually saying? He is saying that the U.S. financial markets and what you have is what they are looking for, and this is what they want. The Russians want our way of life. No, they don't. We're in a huge amount of debt. The system's collapsing. Why would they want this? He said that they're looking at the financial markets because we are the envy of the world. No, we are collapsing. They do not want our financial markets. They don't want to know what Wall Street's doing because it's completely corrupt. It's meaningless. It's fixed. This, again, is propaganda to make you believe that there are Russian spies roaming around the United States looking to crash the economic system. But we know for a fact that the system is already collapsing. But it will be blamed on other countries to bring us into war. And we can see they're pushing North Korea now. North Korea has nuclear weapons, and now North Korea is staging biochemical warfare drills as part of its regular winter exercises. And this is coming from intelligence agencies from South Korea. Again, additional propaganda, because the enemy has to be shown. And this is what they're doing right now. They are showing you who you will be fighting. North Korea, Russia, China, Iran, Syria, and many other nations. They're brainwashing the American people, going through the steps, going through the motions. Because when this event occurs, we need to understand and know where we need to look. Take all eyes off the central bank and the U.S. government. Put it on those other countries or groups. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.